Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about who Sunderland's relegation rivals are heading into the new season. And the reason why we're doing this is because we are waiting for Sunderland to do something in the transfer market. We've been blessed in this summer window, but so far I woke up on Monday morning and I am seeing no news. And even though I'm in desperate need of a new centre-back, there is no news. So I thought today, why not talk about who is going to be in the relegation conversation along with Sunderland. As optimistic as I am that we'll be brilliant this season, the reality is we probably are going to be in a relegation scrap. So yes, we're going to talk today about who is going to be in there, who are the teams to sort of look at, and who will be the potential relegation 6-pointers. So the obvious place to start is the newly promoted teams. Leeds and Burnley are pretty much nailed on to be in the conversation with Sunderland unless one of the three has just an amazing season. The likelihood is that all season will be tied together and people will be saying, whenever they play each other, it's a relegation 6-pointer, and that's fine. That's the way that it goes. All the three teams, have one objective, which is to survive. And I think it's fair to say that all fans of those clubs think that 17th place would represent a good season. And I think if I'm being brutally honest, I think Leeds, in terms of the three teams right now, if Sunderland signs centre-backs, this may change, but the way the teams look right now, Leeds look the most set of the three. I think they've got the strongest squad. They had the strongest base point as well from the summer, and they've added a lot of players to it. So I think Leeds are in a pretty good position. I do think that Sunderland have signed some players that are better than Leeds. I think Granit Xhaka is the best signing anyone has made in the transfer window, but I think overall, because of Sunderland's centre-back issues, you'd probably have to put Leeds ahead of them. And to be honest, even with the centre-back issues, if Sunderland lined up the way they did in pre-season on Saturday against Real Betis, Sunderland will probably struggle against Burnley as well. That's the reality. They need to rectify the centre-back issue, and it'll be a big struggle this season if they are having to play Harrison Jones at left-back and line up with a left-back at centre-back. So that's the reality of the situation we're in right now. But I think Burnley, overall, in terms of where I think all the teams will end up, I think Burnley will be the weakest of the three. They've had to do a lot of maintenance of their squad, and what I mean by that is they've spent a lot of money on players they had last season. In Sunderland and Leeds haven't really had to do that. So I think right now of the three, Burnley are probably going to end up being the weakest come the end of the transfer window, but these three teams will all be in the conversation for relegation. So yeah, Leeds and Burnley obviously are going to be in the scrap. But who else could be in the mix? And there's been a lot of chatter about Brentford, and that is chatter that I'd largely agree with. They've had a window, well, a summer, not even just a window. They've had a summer that's been pretty transformational for them, probably not in a positive way. Losing Thomas Frank, who's been essentially like the heartbeat of that club for a while. He took them into the Premier League. He's kept them there pretty easily the last few years. He's built such a good rapport with everyone at Brentford. So to lose him to Tottenham was obviously a massive blow. They replaced him with Keith Andrews, and some of the viewers on the channel who are like my age will remember like a Chris Hutchins who used to follow Paul Jewell everywhere, and he went to Bradford after Paul Jewell left and struggled, and he was the assistant for Paul Jewell at Wigan, and the same thing happened. He took the job when Paul Jewell left at Wigan and struggled. And I just sort of worry that Keith Andrews, that sort of internal appointment, he has no Premier League managerial experience, well, no real managerial experience to be fair to him. It's going to be really difficult for him to hit the ground running, and especially losing important players. Christian Norgard's left, Brian Mbeumo's left, Jan Wissa's potentially going to leave. I don't even know if he's back in training yet. So Brentford are going to have red flags on them, and I think Brentford fans would probably say that there is less optimism on their end compared to the last few years when they've been, potentially a team that could break into the top sort of 8 in the Premier League. What I will say for Brentford though, and if there is any Brentford fans watching this isn't all negative for them. They are such a smart club. They're smart recruiters. They're just generally a football club that I think Sunderland are even trying to emulate, in terms of their recruitment. They will replace the players that have left. They haven't done that really yet, but they will do that. And once that is done, we'll have a far greater impression of what Brentford are going to be. And they've also done this internal appointment, before. This has been something that they've continually done, and it could well work. They like that continuity. So it isn't all doom and gloom for Brentford, and I certainly don't think they're going to finish bottom of the league or anything, but there definitely are alarm bells there, and I think that's a team that Sunderland should be targeting in terms of, their big matches. And if you want to stay up come the end of the season. Potential relegation 6-pointer. So I've got Brentford in there. I think as well, West Ham are a dark horse. I put this on my other channel, Beyond the Big Six. But I think West Ham have got an older squad. I don't think Graham Potter's been a great fit there. I just don't think Graham Potter really is the correct fit for a West Ham job. I actually think Graham Potter would be a perfect fit for Brentford. But that's by the by. I don't think they're filling me with massive amounts of confidence in terms of them being a real threat in the Premier League. I think West Ham right now are just in this limbo period. They're very, very stale. They're very reliant on older players. I look at that front line. They brought in Callum Wilson, and I'll touch wood. But Callum Wilson coming in, an older player who's injury prone. They've got Fulkrug up there, who's an older player. Didn't have a great season last year. His first year in the Premier League. Could be better this season, but he's on the older side. And I just look at West Ham and I just think they're vulnerable, And even though you look at what they've got, obviously a lot of their players would walk into the newly promoted sides. Yes, that's just a given. They absolutely would. But that isn't to say that things like the mood around the club, the London Stadium not being really a massive fortress for them like Upton Park was, there are factors that lead me to think that West Ham, if things went bad for them, i.e. losing on the opening day against newly promoted team because they're playing Sunderland, West Ham could be in trouble. I don't think West Ham would necessarily go down, but I think there has to be a red flag thrown on them, and potentially for the newly promoted teams, they can look at West Ham and think, right, they are a team that are potentially vulnerable to the drop. So I've got West Ham in that conversation as well. Everyone puts Wolves in this conversation, and maybe Wolves will finish in the bottom 8 of the Premier League. They might be a bottom 3rd team, but I think Wolves, they've got a really strong midfield. They've got players that I like. They've got Jorgen Strand Larsen, who's probably the best striker outside the sort of big 7 or 8 clubs, or the teams that finished in the top 8 last season. I really, really like him. They have lost Ryan Aït-Nouri and Matheus Cunha, but last season they were nowhere near danger once Vitor Pereira came in, and I think it'll probably be the same. I think Wolves are like a 45-point team. They're not the best, they're not amazing, but I don't think Wolves will be a masses of danger, but people are putting them in the conversation, and a lot of neutrals and experts worry about Wolves, so maybe I'm missing something there. But I think Wolves are a team that Sunderland could look at as a win, and if we're playing them at home, absolutely target it as, right, that's a potential winnable game. But will Wolves go down? I don't necessarily see it, but people have got them in the conversation there, and they're definitely a team that Sunderland could target. So Wolves tentatively are a team that could be in the conversation. The last team I'm going to put in here is Everton. And the reason for this is that when I look at squads, Everton have got such a small squad. They've got a really good 11, and I think if they're starting sort of 14 or 15 players were fit all season, Everton would be totally fine. But they've got a small squad. David Moyes, the manager, has came out and said that they need new recruits. And to me, that's just the red flag. If you get injuries, if they get 6 injuries that are long-term in the season, they're going to absolutely struggle down there because they just don't have the players to play a 38-game Premier League season. And that's just the reality. They may do business over the last month of the transfer window. They may add 5 or 6 players and make this a moot point. But right now, you look at that Everton team, it's good, it's strong, they've got a lot of good quality, but it is a very, very small group of players that could come to bite them. David Moyes, though, I mean, he didn't do this at Sunderland. He didn't keep Sunderland away from relegation trouble. But everywhere else he's been, he has largely kept the team away from danger. I'm loath to give David Moyes any credit, so that's probably where I'm going to end that there. Don't want to talk about David Moyes much more, but the reality is at Everton, at West Ham, he has kept them away from relegation danger largely, and I suspect he'd probably do it again. So what's the overall verdict here? My view is that there are potentially 2 teams that could struggle enough this season to give 2 of the newly promoted teams a chance at survival, certainly at least one, and I think I look at Brentford and I look at West Ham, but I look at Brentford in particular and think that is the team that the newly promoted side should be targeting and going, right, we can pull them in to this relegation scrap. There are other teams that are potentially vulnerable to it as well that I haven't included, like Nottingham Forest just seem to be a bit chaotic there seems to just be a chance that Nottingham Forest could be drawn in just because their ownership is weird. There's just always things happening there. They just seem like I don't want to say a basket case club because that's not really fair because they've done so well. It just feels like just like a ticking time bomb. I don't know if that's a fair assessment. Maybe Nottingham Forest fans would disagree, but that's just me from the outside looking in. And I'd be very intrigued to know if you've got any teams that you think could struggle this season that I've not mentioned. So let me know in the comments on that one. Please like and subscribe as well. Subscriptions really help because it just helps the channel grow, which is what I want to see happen. I want to build a positive sort of Sunderland fan community, which would be ideal. And yeah, thanks for watching everyone on this video. And as I said, please let me know what you think. Who will be in the relegation scrap this season? Who are the teams that Sunderland are going to be scrapping with from now until the end of the season in May?